Good afternoon, and thank you for being here with us today for community engagement, practical solutions for future-proofing transportation. Uh, this is being hosted by the Florida Chapter's Planning for All Committee, and we are offering 1 CM credit for people who are AICP certified. So the number is there on the slide, and you can just enter that and get some credits. So as I mentioned, this webinar is organized by the Florida Chapter's Planning for All Committee, and the Planning for All Committee was organized in 2019, and it is really focused on uplifting and amplifying voices from different backgrounds and perspectives to really create a holistic approach when serving our communities, while also creating a professional environment, a profession that welcomes all people into that environment. So today the Planning for All Committee really focuses on partnerships, and today we're partnering with our universities and agencies. We are going to hear from our folks at the University of South Florida at the Center for Urban Transportation Research, the University of Florida and the Transportation Institute, and the Sarasota Manatee Metropolitan Organization. So these are our presenters who we have today, and when they start their presentation, they'll be sharing a little bit about themselves and their backgrounds. So today we're going to learn a little bit about the transportation planning landscape, some innovation in engagement across generations, effective community engagement methods, and empowering through citizen academies. Lastly, if we have some time, we will do some Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, there is a button that has a question mark on it. You can just click that and leave your questions there. And if we have time, we'll get to them. If we don't, we will have some written responses emailed out. Additionally, the slides will be emailed out after the webinar. So you will have access to them as well and all the great resources that are provided. So let's get into the webinar and talk about understanding the transportation planning landscape. So my name is Corinne Arriaga. I am a senior transportation planner at the City of Sarasota, as well as the co-chair of the Planning for All Committee. So really, to understand the transportation planning landscape, you need to really understand the transportation planning process and how that really flows in. So it really starts with identifying vision, goals, and objectives, and you do that through a very community engagement oriented approach. So it's not one person in the background saying, these are the visions, goals, and objectives of the transportation system. No, you usually reach out to the community to get what their needs are, what their expectations are, and really develop them based off of that large community effort. The existing and future conditions is very data analysis and data oriented, and then you start to look at the gaps in that data and develop the needs assessments and the strategies based off of those vision, goals, and objectives, and what populates from the needs assessment. And through that, you will develop projects and prioritize them, and then of course develop the funding strategies to implement them, and then you will monitor throughout after implementation to see its effectiveness. So that's generally the process for transportation planning. And so, like I said, it's very community oriented, and there's lots of stakeholders when developing that. I put the public in the center because at the end of the day, those are the people who are really going to influence everything that comes out of those transportation planning products. They should really be the heart and center of those outcomes because that's who it's going to impact. So some of the other players are governments and technical professionals, and that can include public and private sector folks like your engineers and your planners and your landscape architects, as well as organizations like community organizations in the area, as well as maybe some nonprofits. And then I have your advocates. I didn't really put anything under that because it's such a broad range of advocates. It really just depends on the type of plan that you're developing. If it's transit oriented, those are going to be your users. If it's bike, ped, active transportation, you're going to want to look at people who are riding their bikes, commuters, recreational users, just so you can get a really good picture of what's happening, as well as advocates for people with disabilities. Creating a transportation network really needs to be effective for everybody. And so we just have to have all of those people at the table sharing their experiences and their perspectives, so that way we're creating those plans that will have positive outcomes for every user. So I kind of talked a little bit about project types. When people think about transportation, they really think about road projects, I know, or those highway projects or potholes, but transportation is so broad and it's so varied. It's actually what really interests me in transportation. I mean, you can have safety action plans, you can have congestion management plans, you can have active transportation network plans. You can talk about your transportation TNCs, so like your Ubers and your Lyfts, really creating system plans for that and ensuring that our infrastructure is accessible for those curbside management zones. And then, of course, as we start to look to the future, we really have to anticipate what the trends are and what our future transportation systems might look like. And we have to plan for that. So that could mean, how do we create a system for connected and autonomous vehicles? And how does that work for everybody? So how do we continue to ensure that people who don't have CAVs are still able to use this system and still able to create that safe approach? So when we do get into roadway projects, so you remember I talked about the process, and you create these wonderful system plans engaging the community, and then it starts to narrow down into those projects that you prioritize. Well, there is a project roadmap once you start to develop them, and that can start at the visioning and leads all the way down to project completion. And so I wanted to talk about really key points on where, once you start to narrow down into those project specific, into transportation project specific, like that roadway project, where are the engagement touch points as well? Because we know in the plans it's very important, but it can be equally as important as these very specific roadway projects. I think the biggest parts are if there is a visioning element to the roadway project. That's a huge component of community engagement and what that roadway would look like, what elements are included, and what that outcome looks like. The planning and feasibility, where they collect the data to see if there's any impacts to the environment, to the community, to the adjacent properties. That's a huge element where people can get involved and impact the outcome as well. And then the environmental and design phases are some of the last portions where people can get really involved in the outcome of that roadway project, and where their thoughts and their feedback can be implemented into the final design. Once you get to right-of-way, if right-of-way acquisition is needed in the project, that's where the engagement element in a roadway project really ends, because at that point the final design is complete and now they're just acquiring the right-of-way if necessary and moving into construction. So it's very limited what that public engagement is. It's more about public information and communication on construction starting this date, roadways are closed this date, here's a detour. It's not necessarily that feedback loop. It's more about communication and information. So we just wanted to kind of provide that basic layer of transportation planning before we get into some of the really cool information that our other presenters have. And so now I wanted to hand it off to Mary Mohebi so she can share a little bit about what she has to offer.
Thank you, Corinne, for the very insightful presentation and the necessary information we needed for the rest of the webinar. I am Mary Mohebi. I'm leading the Transportation Equity Program at University of Florida. And we are basically translating the research finding to a language which is more understandable for practitioners and policymakers and provide them with those information through the training program that we have. So I'm here today not just as a professional, not in my professional role, but as someone who spend like a lot of time listening and really listening to the voices of people that we generally miss at the table of decision making. I spend a lot of time walking through neighborhoods with them. I spend a lot of time sitting in chairs and talking to them in community centers, classrooms, mosques, synagogues, and just to understand their perspective. And I have seen how their experiences and ideas can completely shift the way that we design. And at the end of the day, help us to not just design better systems, but more human one. Next slide, please. So transportation system doesn't just move people, it reflects the values of the people who design them. And too often the values that you see as kind of representing through the transportation system is a narrow slice of a very few number of people who are kind of responsible for those designings. Like the way that we design a crosswalk, a transit stop, or even a sidewalk, it can easily kind of impact the community access to resources. It can connect generation or leave them completely out of the picture. So here, I just want to provide you with some numbers. We are very good with understanding numbers. That kind of shows that how important it is to have different people from different age groups to be a part of the decision making. In a 2023 study from Global Designing Cities Initiative, they found that cities that actively involve people across age groups are almost 30% more likely to build infrastructure that lasts longer and that adapt well to change, growth, and any type of disruptions. That's huge. That's a huge finding for us. And today, I want to talk about two specific groups that we generally miss them at the table of decision making: senior citizens and teenagers. I want to talk about them not because they don't care about the system, so we don't see them a lot in the community engagement processes, and not because they lack insight, but because the system we built rarely speak their language. And at the end of the day, it's not going to gain trust from these groups. And that's a huge missed opportunities. I'm going to talk about, the why here from planning perspective. First of all, they experience the system differently. Teens and seniors rely more on walking, biking, and public transit, and their daily journey kind of help us to understand the design gap that we have in our system, like missing crosswalk, poor lighting, or inaccessible bus stops. And the second thing from the planning perspective is that they hold untapped insight and creativity. Like teens, for example, they bring fresh, tech-savvy, and future-oriented perspective that's in so many cases is missing from our planning for cities. And then senior citizen, they kind of carry lived experiences, memory, and deep knowledge of how neighborhoods have evolved and what worked before and what's better to be considered for the future development. So together, if we have teens and senior citizen at the table of decision making, it can offer a full spectrum of views that are missing right now, unfortunately, in many cases, specifically in case of teens. And then the third thing is that they're often overlooked, but they are the ones that are directly impacted by every single decision that we are making. Both groups are considered like historically underrepresented in public decision making. How many projects have you seen that, in the community engagement process, they work with the schools, specifically with middle schools and high schools? Rarely. I have worked as planner for so long, and in whole my experience, there were a few projects that we worked for the public parks that kind of we had relationship with the schools and worked with them, and it's kind of a very huge opportunities that we are kind of missing. And at the same time, it creates highest risk for them because of, first of all, safety hazard that our system kind of imposed to this group, and also the social exclusion due to lack of access. And the third thing that we need to consider when we are talking about teens and senior citizens is that they can help us build trust in the community. So teens can kind of helps us to engage with their peers through visual and digital methods that they are very savvy and they have a lot of knowledge about that. And then seniors, they can help us to kind of dig deeper in the community relationship and to be a part of the community through their deep understanding of the social values. And at the end of the day, their inclusion signals respect to the whole community. If in these two groups specifically have been historically isolated in the public decision making processes, and if we have both of them at the table of decision making, it's kind of signal to the community that we are valuing their perspective. So it kind of helps us to build trust easier if we have these two groups specifically as a part of community engagement. Um, Next slide, please. So from a functional and engineering perspective, they can help us reveal operational blind spot. For example, teens and seniors both use the system at its most vulnerable points. For example, before or after peak hours, during off-peak services, and in low visibility environments. So the inputs at the end of the day highlights maintenance, lighting, design flaws that typically our modeling methods misses in the process of planning for the transportation system. And then the second thing is that they diversify input for smarter design decisions. If we include this age group, they can help us improve the quality of user feedback. They can help us reduce the need for costly redesign. And then they reduce long-term system risks because engaging with teens and older adults helps us identify safety hazard very early in the process. And it helps us to kind of with incorporating their feedback, actually, we are going to strengthen liability protection and support the compliance with the universal design standards. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a huge help in building trust building process. They increase public buy-in and project stability. So project that involve a broader demographic area on, they face fewer delays and legal challenges. And specifically improving youth and seniors build community trust, which at the end of the day translate into a smoother implementation and a stronger support during the public review and also the budgeting phase of the projects. And for sure, their contribution can help us to have a future-proofing infrastructure. Next slide, please. So it was just a kind of a preface for what I'm going to say. I want to provide you with, this is a very short presentation, so I just want to hint to some examples that can be helpful for you. There are a number of examples that I would like to share from different cities that engage youth and senior citizens. One of them is from the city of Toronto, the Youth Mobility Lab, which it was a program based on actual city-university partnership in Toronto, and then across Canada in some other cities. They work with students to design better bus services, active transportation options, and this program primarily focused on seeing disability as a potential and navigating opportunities that we can have to improve access to resources and services for individuals with certain challenges in those areas. So there are some lessons that we can learn from the Toronto example. The first thing is that they established youth research team. What happened, what they did exactly was that this team conducted outreach across more than 15 neighborhoods, engaging over 400 peers, 400 young participants through surveys, pop-up town hall, and workshops. And in this way, they kind of maximize access to the younger generation. So one of the actionable items that any city that can come up learning about this example is that they can recruit and empower youth-led teams to kind of work as an ambassador to the whole community. This type of teams, that there are some other cities also that are working in this using this model. These teams can serve as a liaison between municipal planners and the broader youth community, and kind of maximize the integration of their voices into urban development discussions. And the second thing was that they work with educational center to integrate some urban planning education into the school curriculum. One of the things that we can consider is that, as an actionable item, is that collaborating with educational institution would be very beneficial to kind of enhance the public awareness about the opportunities of engagement. And we know that, I know that we are going to have a presentation about that specifically. The third thing was that they created a youth ambassadorship program for continuous engagement. And so what they did was that they proposed the development of an under 30 ambassador program, and they wanted to maintain ongoing dialogue between youth and city planners over, kind of beyond the age of a specific project. So it's a kind of a continuous collaboration between the youth community and also the governmental sectors. That's going on right now, and it's very similar to the Citizen Academy that we have in some of our cities here in the United States, but they specifically targeted younger generation, the people who are under 30. And with collaboration with the schools, they worked with the teens age group. Next slide, please. So there are also some examples from other countries. The one that you see here is from the city of Antwerp in Belgium. So Antwerp has implemented a strategic policy plan known as the Teenage Space Network. They focuses on developing public spaces that kind of cater to the needs of teenagers. It was developed based on a prior research that they had with young people in Flanders, and then they started applying that throughout the entire city. So the plan basically aims to create a network of spaces that are accessible and also appealing to teenagers, and also ensuring that they have the active participation in the process of developing those spaces. There are five key finding from this project specifically. The first thing is that teenagers' spatial behavior is dynamic and multifaceted. Like, teenagers often engage in hopping behavior, moving from various public spaces rather than staying in one single location. And this pattern kind of reflect the desire for autonomy and exploration, and kind of highlight the need for a network of interconnected spaces that kind of can cater to their mobility and also social needs. And then the second thing is that the value of proximity and connectivity versus design aesthetic. So for teenagers, the location and accessibility of public spaces are more critical than their specific design feature. They value spaces that are easily reachable and connected. It kind of shows us, how how we are seeing, the needs of younger generation here in the United States. Um, Instead of having destinations that are closer and connected, we kind of spend a lot of money and a lot of resources for standalone facilities that are well designed, and we rarely think about a reliable and accessible opportunity in between different places that we are designing. The third thing is that teenagers value a variety of complementary spaces, like a diversity variety of public spaces that kind of offer different functions, such as sport, relaxation, social interaction, and fun, which is kind of essential to meet, the varied needs for teenagers. And this diversity kind of supports their developmental needs and encourage regular use of public spaces for them. And the fourth thing is that teenagers' use of a space is often misunderstood. So policymaker and planner, when we talk about teenager, unfortunately, we get the comments that teens' use of public spaces are unpredictable and problematic. But this project specifically showed that with careful observation and engagement, we can easily understand that, what is the main need that they have, and also the importance of including them in the process of the decision making is actually very essential, because we don't have a general understanding of what they need. And then the other thing that they focused on that, and it's kind of universal, it's correct with for so many other engagement effort, is that early integration of teenagers' need in planning is very crucial. And it kind of helps us. It's not just helping teenager themselves, it also helps us to come up with some solutions that works for the whole society. And this proactive approach actually helps us to prevent costly modification that later on happen in so many instances, and kind of prevent so many of the social issues and disorders that we face here. Like several crime issues that we face in our cities relates to not having accessible resources for younger generation to grow. So therefore, things like social isolation or being trapped in one specific social condition will prevent them from effectively addressing their needs, and getting access to different things that they need to grow and see the world from a different perspective. So this situation the situation that we have, these isolated patches that we design here sometime in some of our cities, it will lead to social trauma, it will lead to social disorder, and a bunch of other issues that we generally face in those type of areas. Next slide, please. So I think I need to make it shorter. So there are other examples also in, for example, Helsinki. They are working. They have a. I'm going to talk about senior citizens in this slide. So there are some very very beautiful examples of projects in Helsinki, Tokyo, and also city of Houston. That, for example, in Helsinki, they had a project called Urban Memories. They equipped senior citizens with tablets preloaded with archival photos, and as they walked through the neighborhood, they annotated those spaces, what they remember, what changed, what they wished could come back, and what is not working. And it was not just a nostalgic, kind of project. It was deeply practical, because this reflection helped planners understand how places evolve and what matters most over time to senior citizens. And the city also have several cameras being installed in public spaces, for not for themselves, in fact, for the city officials, but also for the citizens to see those places and see how those work and go and experience those, and then provide feedback to the city officials. And Tokyo is another example that they embedded a lot of AI-assisted tools to help senior citizens navigate the city better. For example, they have AI-assisted kiosks in community centers. They allow senior citizens to give feedback by simply just speaking. So kind of the technology is kind of turning their thoughts into transcript and send them to the planning team. So there is no need for a password or interface to navigate. It's a very easy access tool. And then it's actually like what we call, dignity-driven design. And another example is the city of Houston, and there's a number of projects that they had with Generation United, which is an NGO that works on creating opportunities for intergenerational interaction within different cities. And it's a very good example to go to their website and see what they're doing. So next slide, please. So if we want to talk about technology, like there's another example that we can use the new technologies to kind of help senior citizen kind of navigate, and also younger generation navigate the changes that we are making. There was a lot of those examples during the MPC conference in Denver, for example. So imagine if you can allow people walk a redesigned intersection before it is built through virtual reality. This is exactly what a number of cities, for example, city of Melbourne, is doing with its VR Citizen Lab. So residents from all ages, they can enter a virtual rendering of their neighborhood and provide feedback by walking in it. And it's very kind of user-oriented. Seniors navigate the space using joysticks and voice commands, while younger generation engage via gamified missions. There's so many gamified missions for them, and they can participate and play, and at the same time provide feedback. So just to kind of wrap up our conversation, so those were a few examples, of how and why we can engage senior citizen and younger generation in the process of decision makings. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is um, the importance of considering nature always as a part of the planning process when we are working on transportation. We rarely talk about how nature can help us, and or national elements can help us to make a transportation system more comfortable for the senior citizens and younger generation, but it's a very essential part of the equation that we need to be mindful. And one of the main key components here is that we need to have multidisciplinary groups that are working in transportation project. Oftentimes, we have just planners and engineers being at the table, design table, and other even budgeting and other phases of a project. But it's very essential to have people with urban sociology background, people from environmental science background, being directly a part of the decision making and designing process of our project. Next slide. Thank you very much for being here and listening to this very short presentation. It was kind of a very small and a short part of what we are working on in the Transportation Equity Program. And there is an upcoming training in 2 weeks. And we have a very very new kind of methods that we have instructors from other areas of the country. We have Dr. Afsalan this time joining us. He was the previous advisor to Governor Newsom, and right now he's at UC Berkeley and also the Triangle. If you have any question about the training and also the presentation, I will be here to answer. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mary. We appreciate it. And thank you for providing really great information. I thought what you talked about with the VR, being able to see your neighborhood and see what those changes would look like, and being able to navigate them and provide feedback, I think that's a great opportunity for our communities as we look into stepping into the future and future technology. So next we have Varshini Renakunta from the Sarasota Manatee Metropolitan Planning Organization, excuse me. And she will be providing some insight on some engagement strategies.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I am Varshini Renikunta, multimodal planner with the Sarasota Manatee.
Varshini, you paused for me. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, your screen has. Oh, you're back. You're back.
Uh-oh, I am so sorry. I freaked out for a second. Okay, cool. So can you hear me okay? Perfect, cool. So I'll start over again. So I am Varshini Renikunta, multimodal planner with the Sarasota Manatee MPO. And over the next few minutes, I will walk you through how we approach public engagement, what tools we use, how we connect with different populations, and how we kind of overcome barriers to making sure variety of voices are heard at the MPO. Next slide, please. Yeah, to start off with the engagement methods, we do a diverse variety of engagement methods tailored to gather input from various sources. So all the way from interactive maps and online surveys that kind of let people to share feedback at their own convenience, to market visits and community events where we engage with people more face to face. It's more so like using both traditional and innovative methods to reach the public. We also do a lot of focus groups for deeper conversations, for continuous feedback, and more so like having a group that we could rely on throughout the study or the process of a plan. So for our long range transportation plan that is currently in the process of update, we did a radio and a media outreach both in English and in Spanish. to extend our reach to further more populations residing in our region. And of course, we stay very active on social media and share our information through through a weekly newsletter, which kind of keeps the community informed and engaged more consistently. So it's more so like we're not doing something at the point where we want feedback. It's more so like being consistent and doing a continuous effort for getting feedback and putting the information out there to public. Next slide, please. Yes, so how we engage with different populations. So I believe a key part of future proofing or community engagement is more so being comprehensive. Comprehensive in the sense of being able to adapt to different populations and their needs. So we engage with various population groups. So for older adults, we put out information flyers at accessible locations for them, such as libraries or downtown centers or those social cafes. There's an image on the right corner left side, the first photo of me, that's a flyer in downtown Sarasota where we were doing our outreach for the long range transportation plan. And then we also connect with a lot of transit users at transfer stations, to get their perspective of how they feel using public transport, how they feel about the efficiency, how they feel about the network, and etc. And then for younger populations, we visit colleges, universities, we kind of collaborate with school boards and promote our content through their newsletters to reach a wider, younger population. And we also kind of collaborate with a lot of neighborhood associations and host events related to neighborhoods when if we have a study or a plan in a neighborhood. And then we kind of do more so collaborations with a lot of local agencies and our partners to keep this more like a multiple touch point for engagement. Next slide, please. Leveraging structured programs. So, in, so we also rely a lot on structured programs that invite community input in a sustained format. So we have our citizen advisory committee, community traffic safety team, and a lot of various committees that encourage residents and stakeholders to offer feedback. So these programs, the CAC and the CTST, are especially designed to involve residents in the process of plan making. So that's one way where residents could involve. And we also maintain a robust stakeholder list, which kind of encourages collaboration and transparency in various groups. Like if there's a project or a plan that the city of Sarasota is doing, we also make sure to advertise in our social media platforms. So it's more so like sharing information from our stakeholders through the agencies and sharing information from the agencies to our stakeholders. It's like a two-way interaction here. And then our meetings, all our committee meetings and board meetings are open to public. So if you want to give a comment or if you want to discuss about a plan, you could either go to any of our committee meetings and put your voice out there, or you could also submit a comment card for any of the concerns that you might have. And then we have a public participation plan that kind of guides all these outreach efforts to ensure we are being more comprehensive, consistent, and we get measurable outcomes for all the efforts that we do. Next slide, please. Addressing obstacles. So we all know there still are a lot of barriers to participation, and we take those seriously and do what we can, like do our best to overcome those obstacles to participation. So to address the physical barriers, we kind of hold events in multiple locations and make sure those events are ADA accessible. So by multiple locations, I mean, so for example, for our long range transportation plan, we kind of loosely divided the plan into three phases, and we had a community event, a workshop, and a survey for three of those phases. So for the event, we made sure the three of the events are kind of spaced out in the region. One was in the north of the area, one was in the center of the region, and one was in the south. So it gives residents more accessibility to go to the event that they're closer by. So it's not that we are asking people to go to one location for the outreach, but then it's making sure that we are going to where people are. And then we also provide multiple ways for public comment, whether it could be online or it could be in person. You could send us an email, or you could also connect with us through social media. And then we, like mentioned, we proactively share information about our local projects, which kind of builds trust and awareness about all the projects that happen in the area. And lastly, we share case studies. So sharing case studies as in sharing studies that kind of highlight similar situations or similar plans that had happened somewhere else. So it kind of gives more familiarity to people, and when they see that similar situations happened and people voiced out their impacts, and people are more so likely to engage when they see someone else is engaging. So it's more so like giving them a familiarity and giving that push for people to be more involved and engaged. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Cool. So um, so I just wanted to say that organizations should be more committed to evolving with the needs of the community or the residents, and you should be able to adapt yourself to listen, to learn, and to act on what you hear from the people. And then if you're from the public, make sure your voices are heard and make sure you involve with your local agencies. Start slow, be consistent, and be involved throughout the process, and you will be able to see wonders, and you can change how systems work. And yeah, that concludes my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Varshini. That was great. Really liked what you said at the end, that agencies should be able to adapt their methods to reach people where they are. And I think that's really important. So thank you for sharing that. And just as a reminder for everyone, we are going to send out the slides in an email after this presentation. So you'll have all this wonderful information available to you. But next we have Tia Boyd from the Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida. Thanks, Tia.
Thanks, Corinne. So just a quick about me before I jump in. I am a researcher at the University of South Florida Center for Urban Transportation Research. And my research focuses on a few things, but most significantly, transportation decision making, including public involvement, interagency coordination, and statewide and metropolitan transportation planning. So if we can go to the next slide. I want to start with a quick definition of citizen academies. This session talks about how they support community engagement, but when we say a citizen academy, what is it? So at a high level, it is a course or a set of courses that is designed to educate the public on what local agencies do, their processes, their projects, their activities, and so on. And the goal is really to have a more informed public and a more engaged public. So you'll hear me use those terms a few times throughout, that informed and more engaged. Next slide. And so when we talk about citizen planning academies specifically, we are looking at those programs, those courses, those educational activities to increase their understanding of the planning and development processes and to ensure that more people are engaged in community and city planning. And this is from the research that we have done, some of our background research, as where this definition came from. Next slide. And so what this really boils down to is it is a bridge between the technical knowledge that we as practitioners acquired in our training and through our professional careers, what we have learned and what we have known, and connecting that to the knowledge that residents have based on their own lived experiences, based on their knowledge of what their neighbors and their friends have experienced, and really connecting those points together so that we have a very well-rounded process. It truly enhances the public's ability to fully participate in the decision-making process, and so we have things like, for example, the co-production model, which emphasizes the role of community members as experts and relies heavily on their expertise for the entirety of the planning process. We have things like community-led engagement that has been found to result in more engagement from a broader range of community members. And so at the center of that is understanding how the process works and how they can be more engaged. Next slide. And so this results in more in capacity building for more robust public engagement. And when I'm talking about capacity building here, I'm referring to the process of developing and strengthening capabilities. So there's skills, those competencies, those processes to ultimately ensure that established goals are achieved. So when we have our citizen academies, there are several benefits that result from these academies. Staff benefits in that they are able to learn how to interact with the public and ensure that they are implementing effective strategies that meet the needs of the communities that they serve. These academies, the cohorts, if you have use a cohort model, they can encourage long-term networking and collaboration between community members. They also ensure that we have partnerships between community members, agencies, and stakeholders as they support public agencies as they work to build and sustain trust within the communities that they serve. And that was something that came out very frequently. If you look at the literature on citizen academies or building that educational foundation to support planning processes or agency processes, is that trust is really, really at the center of this as well. So, for example, there is a APA PAS memo 112 that on the Baltimore Planning Academy, and that was developed to address barriers to public engagement through relationship building. So they focused on building and sustaining trust by way of the academy. Next slide. And so, as we talk about the Citizens Academies, how we may develop and implement these courses, there are three key considerations that we have to keep in mind. First is that we need collaboration. The second is we have to think about how we are delivering the course. And then we need to really embed engagement and relationship building throughout. And in the next few slides, I'll talk a little more detail about each of these. So if we can go to the next, we will talk about those collaborative efforts. And collaboration really is key. It requires these academies, for them to be successful, we have to have consistent communication between partners, and these partners may support things like identifying potential participants. If you have leaders in community organizations or people in agencies that work closely with the public, they are aware of who has the interest, who has the need of support in this capacity. Um, they may be able to share information about the community's educational needs and interests. What questions are coming up frequently? What are the gaps in people knowing who to contact if they have a specific issue? These stakeholders may also provide resources for advertising and outreach. They may be able to say, for based on the population, what mode of outreach would be best? Is it a flyer as mentioned in the previous presentation, or is it social media? Or would it be better to go at a community event that's happening and talk to people about the academy and to reach them where they are? They may also help identify potential speakers, or they themselves may be a speaker. So it is very important to think about who you are working with to develop the academy and throughout the implementation process. The Academy success truly depends on the partners and the facilitators' local knowledge, their ability to promote the program, and their willingness to contact leaders and key personnel at various agencies to support the Academy. The other point of collaboration is partnering with universities and colleges. And I'm not saying that just because I work at a university, but it is truly a resource. At universities, we have classroom spaces, we have meeting rooms, there are labs, there are lots of resources that can be tapped into for something like an academy. Additionally, our students are can support these academies. I'll go into a lot more detail about how that works because that is what we did for our academy uh, that we had in the city of Tampa. But the students provide, they are a wealth of knowledge, they are creative, they are enthusiastic. And so the ability to benefit from a resource like a student or like that universities provide really can help a academy to be successful. Next slide. And then we have to think about how we are delivering the course. Will it be in person? Are we going to use the traditional model? Are we going to sit in a classroom or sit in a conference room and talk face to face? Are we going to be virtual? And are we going to be virtual? Everybody is online, or are we going to do a hybrid approach where some people are in person and some people are online? Or are we going to do an asynchronous approach, pre-recorded sessions where people can watch at their own pace, and we maybe have occasional check-ins where people can make sure they're staying on track? The mode that is used for course delivery depends on the population characteristic. It depends on who you are trying to reach, what mode would be most effective for them. It depends on the resources that are available, funding, things like the technology to ensure if you're using a virtual model or you need maybe a projector to share slides. So we have to think about the resources that are available and several other factors that come into play. Timing, what time are the sessions going to be? What time works? Does that work in an in-person or virtual model? And the other point as we think about course delivery is sharing information about community resources that provide access to technology, regardless of the mode that is used. Things like a library or a community center may help accommodate persons who maybe have internet or broadband limitations or technology limitations. So sharing those resources, but the key to that is understanding the population who you are reaching and those who will be participating in the academy. Next slide. And then engagement and relationship building. So in my first point, my first consideration, I talked about collaboration, and that was more so between the facilitators or organizers of the academy and the partners or stakeholders that may support the academy. When we're talking about engagement and relationship building here, we're talking about throughout the course. And this may be between participants, between the facilitators, participants, between the facilitators, participants, and stakeholders. So it's a greater mix of communicating about here. And this will ensure that we have a long-term partnership. This once again ensures that we are building and sustaining that trust that this academy can help establish. And we can do that through, our typical icebreakers, which everyone gets a little nervous when we say, okay, share a fun fact and tell us about yourself. But it truly is effective in kind of putting people at ease and ensuring that they are comfortable speaking up and asking questions and participating in discussions. If we are online, that may look like taking 5 minutes at the beginning of the session, having everyone turn their cameras on, or having cameras on during discussions and Q&A. Because we want to overcome that disconnect that we feel when we're working online. Another thing that we did in our academy that has been effective is taking an opportunity to step outside of the classroom setting and having an opportunity for some engagement that way. And that may look like a tour, a walkabout, that may look like an informal meet and greet, or it may be an educational event where they're still learning, but it's not in a traditional classroom or online classroom setting. Next slide. And so I will take just a few minutes. I'll go through these pretty quickly because we only have about 5 minutes left. But I wanted to share with you all a little bit about our experience with our academy, the Tampa Bay Citizens Academy on Transportation, or TBCAT, as we called it. And if we could jump to the next slide. This was an 8-week free course. It was offered online. It was designed to help citizens or residents in the city of Tampa understand the transportation planning process. And we did this in partnership with the city of Tampa, and we worked very closely with them through the beginning, during the course, and then even at the end during follow-up and during our outreach activities and during our out-of-class activities. We worked very closely with the city on this academy. Next slide. So we initially intended this class to be this course, this academy to be in person, but this was in 2020, and we had to really think on our feet and shift to a virtual model. So initially, we modeled it after the Portland Traffic and Transportation course, but in our reimagining of this course for a virtual model, I made it our own, and we identified a few key lessons learned along the way. And so on the slide, you see our high-level approach. We established our partnerships and relationships. We identified our course delivery method, which was kind of chosen for us. But then we had things like, well, what platform to use, and how do we register people, and how do we reach people now that we're online and not in person. So we really had to be creative. And then, of course, we developed the course content. And this was a part that was essential working with the city and working with our other partners. They helped us identify the areas and the gaps that the academy would need to most effectively fill. So what questions come up a lot? What types of projects are people having a lot of questions or uncertainty about, so that we can address them throughout the course. And we hosted the course. We did evaluation. We did weekly evaluation and pre and post course evaluations, which are very informative in helping us to improve the course throughout the 8 weeks. We did class projects, which were optional, but this was a part of the Portland model that we wanted to continue into ours. We did some engagement outside of the sessions, and I'll show you some photos of the work that we did there. And then we did after session follow-up to really maintain that relationship. All right, and we'll go through these next few really quickly. So the next slide is a picture of us at our walkabout tour, which was led by City of Tampa staff, and we got to see all the cool projects that they were doing. And we did a little meet and greet afterwards, and really got to talk more with our participants in a less formal setting. Next slide is our seminar and poster session that we held at the Tampa Union Station. And this included presentations from City of Tampa staff, our participants. They presented on their projects and had posters on their projects. And this was attended by leadership and staff from various public agencies. Our students attended, our University of South Florida students attended, and we had other participants supporting their fellow TB-CATers. In the next slide, I talk about our student involvement, which was critical and really guaranteed the success of our course. Our students provided technical support to our participants throughout their projects. And the students benefited because they were exposed to a range of transportation issues through their involvement. And they also became familiarized with working with citizens, some of the issues that the residents face, how they may be addressed, how the residents thought about the issues that they were experiencing. And we can click through really quickly on the next few. We can just kind of boom past those. We can see some of the examples of how the students supported the TB-CAT participants. And at the end, they had a report. And so what we found was that through this model, residents had a really, really strong understanding of the transportation planning process. Funding was a big one that we found out through our evaluations, that people really wanted to understand more about funding and how it worked. Um, they understood agency coordination and they knew how to get involved. And then finally, a quick recap. Um, the Citizen Academy support effective community engagement through education. They should be designed with collaboration, course delivery, and relationship building in mind. Once again, supporting trust. And then our experiences showed that residents became more confident in their understanding. They were able to communicate their community's transportation needs, and they felt comfortable being engaged in the overall transportation planning process. And the next slide was my email if you have any questions. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Tia. That was awesome. Just learning about the Citizen Academy is so interesting to me, and all of the valuable information that you provided is really helpful. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time to answer Q&A in the webinar. We will take those back and provide written responses. Just one note before we go, this is offering CM credits, of course. Here is the number that you can log the CM for. I really appreciate everyone being here today and listening to all of the great information all of our panelists had to share. And thank you, Tia and Varshini, for being here and providing all that information. Mary had to leave, but we thank her as well. So thank you again, and you guys all have a great day.